Ukraine. Thank you, Anna. Interfax Ukraine, Irina Sommer. Secretary General, we all know that NATO will not fight for Ukraine, but don't you think it's time for NATO to build anti-Putin coalition? Thank you.
NATO stands in solidarity with Ukraine, and NATO allies are imposing severe costs on Russia for the reckless invasion of Ukraine. NATO allies, in close coordination with the European Union and other partners all over the world, are now imposing severe economic sanctions on Russia to demonstrate that we follow up on what we said, and that is that it will be a high price for Russia to pay. NATO allies have also over a long period of time provided support, practical support, military support to Ukraine, and helped them to build a much stronger, much better equipped, much better trained armed force today than Ukraine had in 2014. And I would like to recognize the professionalism and the bravery of the Ukrainian men and women in uniform who are now standing up against the Russian invasion. So we continue to stand together, condemning the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and allies stand together also in sending a message that we will never accept the brutal violation of international law that we see taking place as Russia now invades Ukraine.
Hello, Mark Carlson, Associated Press. Is the NATO response force inside Ukraine right now?
No, there are no NATO combat troops, no troops, NATO troops at all inside Ukraine. We have made it clear that we don't have any plans and any intention of deploying NATO troops to Ukraine. What we have made clear is that we have already increased, and we are increasing the presence of NATO troops in the eastern part of the lines on NATO territory. Ukraine is a highly valued partner. We have supported Ukraine for many, many years. We helped them to build a more modern, capable armed force, military. We have helped them to train, equip, and in many different ways strengthen their armed forces. We help them with cyber defenses, NATO and NATO allies in different ways. But we don't have NATO troops in Ukraine, and we don't have any plans to send NATO troops into Ukraine. But we are there to protect and defend all NATO allies. So we support Ukraine. We provide absolute security guarantees for NATO allies. And we demonstrate that commitment by increasing the presence in the eastern part of the alliance.
We'll try to take a couple of questions online before we come back to the press room. So we'll go to Steve Erlander from New York Times.
Thank you, Secretary General. Two quick questions. One, do you still have military deconfliction contacts with Russian forces today? Are those ongoing? And secondly, a lot of NATO countries are going to want to keep supplying weapons to Ukraine. Do you foresee this as a major risk of NATO-Russia conflict? And where else do you see risks of conflict now between Russia and NATO countries that could spill over into something worse? Thank you, sir.
We have increased the presence in the eastern part of the alliance, and we have activated NATO defense plans today to make sure that we do not see any spillover to NATO territory. Because as long as Russia knows that an attack on a NATO ally will trigger the response from the whole alliance, they will not attack, because we are the strongest alliance in history. And as long as we stand together and make clear that we are committed by our collective defense commitments, that's the best way to prevent any attack, any spillover from the tragedy, the heinous attack we see in Ukraine, spillover onto any NATO allied country. The NATO allies have provided support to Ukraine in many different ways over the last years, especially since 2014. NATO has helped them with the cyber defenses. We have also helped them with some different trust funds, some different activities, and then on top of that, and different capacity building measures, help them to strengthen, include their naval forces and other elements of their armed forces. But then on top of what NATO has done as the alliance, NATO allies have also provided military equipment, including defensive weapons and other types of support training. It will be a national decision in what way allies continue to provide support. So that's for individual NATO allies to decide. Deconfliction is extremely important for us.